Maybe we can just also move to the first slide with this first indications and the small agreements for the webinar, how we're going to work. First of all is introducing yourself in the chat with the name and the organization if possible. Important point is that the webinar will be recorded, it's an attention point. If it's problematic for you, then yeah, please take this into consideration. Important to switch off your microphone unless we give you the word. Otherwise, we might be ending with strange background sounds. If you have questions, the best is to ask them in the chat. It helps us to structure a bit the discussion, but you can also raise your hand. Yes, when you speak, please put your video on if possible. We know that sometimes it can be problematic due to connections, but it's always nicer if we see you speaking. And also the presentations that will be showed today will be made available online, and the recording of today also. So the first point is to introduce yourself, and I realized that I have not done it myself. So to start, I'm Jean-Philippe Odeus. I'm program manager at the managing authority of the Interreg Meuse-Rhine program. And today, together with my colleague Haluka, we will give you some key elements on this call 8, which will be the last call of our program. And yeah, the idea is to give you helpful indications to be successful in this call. So I think we're ready to start, and we can then move on. The general today, what are we going to discuss? There's the first part with the general presentation of the call, the specificities of the call, and then also a time for question and answers related to this call specificities. And then we do a small break, because normally we are planning that this will last 2 hours, so we think it's good to take a few minutes as we are half time. And the second part, it goes more about general recommendations about the application form, how to proceed, how to understand the different expectations from the program, and there are also some questions and answer time. That's it, and so let's directly start with the general introduction on this call. And maybe just the first thing is to tell something about Interreg Euroregio Meuse-Rhine in globality for the people who are attending and do not know our program, or it's the first time that you are in contact with the program. I can tell you a bit more. If we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so the area, it's covering Belgium, Netherlands and Germany. So as you can see here on the map, we're really at this area where these 3 country borders are touching, and that's also the main purpose of this program, is to support cross-border cooperation between the different member states, Belgium, the Netherlands and Germany. So that's what we will focus on, and that's what we're looking for our initiatives that are also stimulating cooperation and also addressing eventual challenges in this region, and to facilitate the interaction across the borders. So as for now, like I said, this is the last call. So we already had 6 calls and also a specific COVID call where we were able to support initiatives that were helping also to be more efficient when facing this special situation that we have faced and still are be facing. So far, 62 projects were selected, and we have more than 600 project partners, and this for a total of 196 million. And on average, we give 50% ERDF support to all these projects. And yeah, so here we can move on to call 8, the specificities, and yeah, the key information about this call. Yeah, to start with is that we have a cooperation program that was set up in 2015. This program is describing what are the ambitions of the program and its objectives for this period 2014-2020. Yeah, now we are almost at the end of this period, and when I say 2020, it still has an implementation time until end 2023. So that's why we're still here with a last call, as we have not addressed all our objectives, and this is why we now are launching a call and also looking for initiatives that are very specific under our access to economy, but also the specific objective 2.2, which is increase the resource efficiency of SMEs. So this is really a targeted call. It differs from the previous calls, where previous calls were broader and addressing all of the objectives of the program. But now in this last phase, with this last call, we will focus and target really on this efficiency in the use of resources at SME level. So that's important. And this is why we also insist that the target group of the projects must be SMEs. And there must be a direct or indirect link with this target group clearly in this in your applications, because yeah, that's where we think that support is needed for this period. Of course, there's a lot of things to do in terms of efficient use of resources, but again, this is really targeted to the SME. And also to formalize it a little bit, is we have this indicators, this output indicators, and these are output indicators that we had to define when setting up the cooperation program in 2015. And as you can see, we have 2 indicators which are linked to this objective of efficient use of resources at SME level, and we have this PSI, which is program specific indicator, 6, which is number of projects supported addressing a rational usage of resources in SMEs, and the second one, which is PSI 17, is the number of projects aimed at increasing the energy autonomy of SMEs. So as you can see, it's really in the formulation also quite straightforward, and also always including the fact that it is around SMEs. So you will have also, when drafting your application form, you will have to select at least one of these 2 indicators, and also tell in which way you will contribute to that. We will tell you later in part 2 how this reflects concretely in an application form, where you can find this back. But still, to come back on the indicators, also what's important to know is that this is what we call a program level indicator. It's telling the number of projects, and so to avoid any misunderstanding, it's important to understand that it's our projects at the level of the program and not projects at the level of your own project. So it's not telling about sub-projects or subparts in your project. So this is why in your application form, when selecting one of these two indicators, you always have to select or put in the value 1. Yeah, and I still see indeed there was an indication. If you can go back to the slide, there's a small exception if you have sub-projects, but this is really very specific if you have a umbrella project with really different parts where we can say, okay, this exists as a project on its own. But given the context here, and given that we will have a very short time for implementation, we do not expect that. Should you doubt on it, should you think that the value can be more than 1, okay, come back to us, we will discuss it. But do not deviate from this rule of putting 1 without getting in discussion with us, because this might be lead to a misunderstanding of your application, and leading you to be less successful. Yeah, we can move back to the next slide then. Yeah, again, well, I told you it's the last call, so after this there will be no opportunities anymore in this period. For the ones who are following us on regular basis, you know that we already have announced that there will be a next programming period. There will also be initiatives or room for initiatives around greener economy. But this will be for the future. The timeline is not known at this moment, so what we can tell you with absolute certainty is what we can tell you today about this program period. But as said, we are at the end of this programming period, and so as projects, we had the rule that the maximum duration for a normal project was 36 months. Now, obviously, there's no time anymore for this 36 months until end 2023. So this is why this project durations for this call are now limited to 18 months. And this is also meaning that we have defined an earliest start date, which is the 1st of January 2022. This is to be explained by the fact that there's still a procedure where you have to draft your application, where we have to assess it and still take a decision. And this leads us to the 1st of January as the earliest start moment. We will show you a timeline a bit later. And also the latest end date should also be 30th June 2023. So as you can see, it's a very stiff time frame, not giving much flexibility, but yeah, it's the time that we have. And it's very important that you take this into account when developing your application. It's that yeah, there's no margin for deviating from this. So it's important that you think your project as a project that can be implemented within 18 months. Then we have this ERDF standard support rate, which is 50%. This is a maximum 50% that we can give. There can be situations where we will have to go a bit lower due to state aid. That's possible, but we also will come back on that later. Also, something specific here for this call is that we have a flat rate for travel and accommodation, which is 1.5% of the staff cost. Was already implemented in the previous round, but for the ones maybe who have been involved in the projects of the very beginning of the period, this flat rate was not existing. So this means that you don't have to take care of calculating any travel accommodation costs. It's included directly. It will be calculated based on your staff cost. Yeah, the language of submission. As for the previous rounds, in our program, it's mandatory to hand in an application in the 3 official languages of the program, which are French, Dutch, and German. We also accept the English, but this is an optional language. So the practice has shown that most of the applicants are working in English together to come to a joint final version, and then move to the translation, or proceed with the translation once that they have one agreement, or one version in which they all agree. Our system, the digital portal in which you have to through which you have to submit your application, can handle these 4 languages. So it's up to you to see how you think it's the most efficient way to work. Or you start in one of the languages, depending on your partnership, or you work directly with the translation, or you go to English. It's very flexible, but at the end, the official application must at least have these 3 languages. Still important also to know, also looking a bit further, if the project is selected and will be implemented, you can report to us only in English, but that's meaning that you also need to have an English version of the application form. It can always be done later if wished. Okay, I think that's the specificities of this call. Can maybe proceed with the next slide. Yeah, here about the calendar, or what he was telling you. So there's not much time. Also, not that much time also to write down your application and to set up a project. So it's important that you are early in the process in working. Also, we know it's the summer period. It's not always easy to get everybody on board, but you have to find the ways to proceed, because as you can see, the submission, the latest moment is the 21st of September, so it will go very quickly. But the first milestone, let's say, in this process is on 17th of August, where we will publish officially the call regulation. So it will be built on all the information that we are passing now, but this call regulation is a legal binding document. So and that's then also a bit before the first day of the official project submission possibility, which will be 31st of August. So this is not meaning that you cannot work on your projects or applications from now on. So you can start now. We also have our portal, which is the EMS, in which you have to put in all your information. It's open. You can start creating an application. You can start work there. You can start to have a first look on it. This is working. You can proceed. The only point, what's important with with the date of 31st of August, is that you cannot send the application before the 31st of August to us. If you do that, we will not count it as a valid submission. So it can only happen between 31st of August and the 21st of September at 12 o'clock. So noon. So that's the very last moment to submit it. So and it's even not at noon, but it's before noon. So one advice is do not wait until the 21st September, 11:59. This is very risky and would be very unhappy should you encounter any technical problem at that moment. This would then basically invalidate a lot of work that you have put into this process. So start with it early enough and do not wait until the last minute. That's the advice we can give. After that, after the 21st September, we will start looking at the different applications. We will start assessing them, also see how good they fit with our criteria, which Rahaluka will explain you a bit later. Then there will be a first round to discuss the projects, which is the 17th of November. And then there will be a second round, which is the 8th of December, where the monitoring committee will take the selection decision. And then we will proceed as managing authority with the approval of your project. And the idea is that it can be launched on the 1st of January, and that we can also send you the grant letter before then. But it's important that you also pay sufficient attention to the quality of your application now in this first stage, because then it can help. It will allow us also to be fast in proceeding with the approval of your project and sending you the grant letter. Should there be unclarities between the moment of selection by the monitoring committee and the moment of the approval by us, then we will have to clarify things, and this will then postpone also or the moment when we send the grant letter. This should also not mean automatically that you cannot start on the 1st of January. You can certainly start on the 1st of January, even without the grant letter. The only point is, depending on some organizations still want the security, but as we told you, the time frame is very short, so we all need to be very efficient in this process. So that's also the key message with this time frame. So in terms of financial terms, the envelope for this call is 5 million euros, and this is meaning, like mentioned, it's 50% of the global envelope. So at the end, we are aiming at a global envelope for projects of 10 million total costs, and we can then support the initiatives for the 10 million with ERDF support of 5 million. It's possible to have additional regional support above the ERDF, but that's depending on the region. The conditions are differing from region to region. So we have a document in the application package which is describing the different procedures and also who you have to contact with regard to your request. As mentioned also before, this 50% is a general rule, but not an absolute reality. Sometimes, due to state aid, we cannot give the support. We need to limit it. So, but we'll tell you a bit more about state aid also later on. And I also recommend that, okay, there is the envelope is 5 million ERDF. If you go for the 5 million in one project, we think it might be very risky. But if you're convinced, you can certainly go for that. But our general advice is to say, okay, maybe do not aim to get the full amount within one application. Yes, so as I told you, this call is also a targeted call. So we have identified also beyond this first limitation, which is energy efficiency at SME level. We have identified specific topics, and so all applications need, or yeah, each application needs to fit within at least one of these action fields. And they are green hydrogen, energy communities, the use of low voltage direct current technology, development of local production of technology for integrated photovoltaics, and information exchange on the topic of energy to stimulate and promote the energy transition and create synergies in the field of EMR. So, as I said, it's at least one of these topics. Sometimes it's also possible, but you will know more than us, and how far you can combine eventually these topics. Huh? So, but again, if your the application needs to be in that field. So if you say, okay, but that's not my field of activity, then I'm afraid that this call is not for you, and that maybe then you have also to think and to wait and wait for the next program period where we will have new opportunities. So maybe still some few advices to be successful, like already said. There must be a clear link between clear link with the SMEs as a target group. Should it be direct or indirect? So direct is meaning that you're really going to implement things in SMEs, but indirect is also maybe that you're developing tools that will help SMEs to be more performant without having them directly involved into the process at this stage. It's important that you also achieve the results within the lifetime of the project, and that you can also show this connection during the project lifetime. We want something tangible as a result of the project, not a general study that tells about eventual something for within the 10 or next 15 years. We want to see and have impact with our program now on short term. We also advise you to try to limit the partnership as much as possible, because our experience is that large partnerships with a lot of project partners are very it's time consuming to manage it. It's asking a lot of effort to have everybody looking into the same direction, and again, this time is not available now. So this is why we advise you to really think about the added value of everyone in the project. Also maybe thinking about having cooperation as associated partners. It is a possibility to still have people involved, but without also making the project too bulky and too difficult to handle within this short period. Important thing is also one of the limitations, one of the rules that we have in terms of eligibility of cost is that we work with depreciation costs. So if you, we advise you to not include a lot of equipment or infrastructure investments, because you will not be able to get funding for it in a large extent. It will be minimal. So that's something to take into account. If infrastructure is needed, consider maybe other financing sources to help finance these equipment or infrastructures, and then build on with the expertise that you can bring, this cross-border expertise that you can bring with this project. So again, the project plan must be realistic and be feasible to be achieved into 18 months. And we're really insisting on that because it's go very fast, very quickly. We know that from the experience with the other projects. And again, so very interesting for us are also demos or pilot projects, so that you can demonstrate something very tangible. But then if you do that, be reasonable in your ambitions. So it's maybe better to be a bit less ambitious, but giving security on the fact that what's promised will come and will happen, rather than promising a lot and at the end not being able to deliver. This is something that we will look very closely when assessing the project. So come over with a realistic plan, realistic proposal, because it binds you. So we are judging on what you're promising, and so we expect you also to deliver. Yeah, so like I said, okay, we want to see a clear impact. So we don't just want to see a study. It needs to be very practical as output. And yeah, I started with that. I started with showing you the map of the area and telling you that Interreg is about cross-border cooperation. So, and cross-border cooperation is not looking at your local regional needs and just then developing something and just telling each other about it. So that's what we did in the very beginning of Interreg. Now we are in Interreg 5, and our expectations are much higher. And the expectations are that you are working together on a solution. And you can have common issues, or so something that brings you together and just say, hey, we are facing exactly the same issue, or this issue is preventing us to cooperate better across and to go to across the border. Or you can have similar issues in your regions, and okay, then it's a bit more local. But then the ambition is to be there to solve it together, and really to develop something, a tool or a results that are joint products that will then also tackle the issue in the different parts of the area, but not just doing your normal stuff and then just inform each other about this. This is not what we are for. There are other funding opportunities, but all programs really looking at cross-border cooperation. So it's really within. We want to see you cooperate and working together towards one solution. So that was it for the first part of this of call 8 specificities. And now my colleague Raluca will dive into more details about the key documents that we expect from you within this call. Yeah, so and then we will then proceed with the question and answers. Raluca, the floor is yours.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Raluca, and I will explain a bit more about the key documents and where to find them and what to be aware of. And I will also try to better explain the answer that was given here in the chat regarding how small should a consortium be. So if we go to the next slide, right. So this is what you need to know about the application package. Maybe some of you have already went online. You have there the link to our website. There is this application package provided for this call 8. There you will find the call guidelines, and there are these rules that are provided and some guidance based on the comments that we have received in the past and the mistakes that have been made. And it's very important that you read this document. And of course, the official call regulation, as announced before, will be published later in August, but it will also be available within the package later on. But what is interesting for you maybe is that you can already have a look at the application form template, which is provided as a Word document, but beware that what we expect as an official submission is what will be in the EMS. So as already stated by my colleague, the EMS is already open. Please go there, create an account for yourself in case you do not have one. We will also show you which how the screen looks, where to click, let's say, as to submit the application or to create it first. It's important that you start working with the system as soon as possible, so that in case there are questions about different things that you do not understand, you still have time to come back to us. And when I say to us, I want to acknowledge here the presence of our colleagues from the regional antennas that have joined us today, and that will always be in touch with you as the partners, and also the colleagues from the Joint Secretariat, the help desk colleagues, and everyone on the program as such. So do not be afraid to ask questions. There are no such things as bad questions. It's better to have clarity on things so as not to make any mistakes. Also in the application package, you will have a budget template. It's an Excel file. This one you can work as a draft, but as mentioned before, you need to have everything in the EMS for the application to be submitted. And there are also some annexes that are very important, that are mandatory for the submission. So in case you miss one of these documents, your application form will be rejected from the point of view of the eligibility, and it will not be taken into consideration. So please be aware that all submissions need to have a partnership agreement, that it is signed and dated by each member of your partnership. It's very important, and I want to highlight this. It needs to be signed and dated. We have seen in the past partners that forget to sign or that forget to date. So when we are talking about eligibility, you really need to cross your I's and to put all the dots and all the things in the right place. So please be aware of this. Be also aware that now we know it will be summertime. Maybe some people will be away on holidays, and ideally you should plan well in advance to be able to collect all signatures on your partnership agreement. There is also something called the state aid self-assessment. This is a form that has to be signed and stamped and dated by each partner individually. So it's not one form that can be submitted at project level. It is an individual document, and we would like you to be aware of this. We also saw in the past that some people just like made one general template and everyone signed. And that is what they submitted, but that's not the intent. The intent is to make every partner acknowledge what is their state aid situation. Are there possibilities of lower funding rates or not? So please be aware of this form as well. And then there is another self-declaration, legal status and not in difficulty. This is also another form that needs to be signed and dated by each partner individually. And basically, it is linked to the European regulation stating that we shouldn't provide public support to entities that are in difficulty. So basically, you are saying that you are not bankrupt, you are not undergoing any, let's say, reorganization processes, or that you have any difficulties with the law. So that's the meaning of this self-declaration. So, as mentioned before, these 3 documents are mandatory, and please do not forget one of them. Like if you have 5 partners, and then when we look at the application form and we only see 4 self-declarations, that means you are missing one document and you are application form will not be further processed. So be aware of this thing. And another annex that is of interest to you is the overview of external, regional, or national co-financing. So as stated earlier today, you will, by applying for this funding, you get 50% ERDF, but there is also the possibility of getting extra funds from your regions or from your countries, let's say. And in this case, there are different procedures. We will not get into them, but reading this document will give you a better feel of who to contact. For this issue of clarifying co-financing, it's mandatory that you keep in touch with your regional antennas and you contact them early on in the process, and you are aware of the steps that need to be taken. In the case of Dutch partners, there are also additional forms that need to be signed, additional declarations and statements, but please contact the regional antennas for this aspect. And then we can move on to the next slide. Also in the application package, there are two additional documents. They are not mandatory. You can deliver them later on if the program asks you to. So be aware that you have them, but they are not mandatory. This is the de minimis self-declaration. Let's say that you are a more experienced partner when it comes to state aid. You have done several other projects before. You know how the state aid works, and you do your own self-assessment when it comes to state aid, and you determine that you would like to make use of this de minimis. We will also present a bit for those that are, let's say, new to the topic, what de minimis means and what it entails in terms of funding. But let's say that you want to make use of this possibility. Then, of course, if you so desire, you can already sign this self-declaration. If you are not sure what it is, you can also wait later on, because the program will come back to you and clarify this issue. When it comes to the partner declaration on own means, if you have read or you will read the call guidelines, you will see there that there is a specific remark when it comes to partners from Belgian Limburg. It says that those specific partners need to take into account that they only have ERDF and their own funds when it comes to doing an application form in this program. So for the Belgian Limburg partners, there is no need to sign such a partner declaration on own means. For the other partners, what would normally happen would be that maybe you get in touch with your regional antenna and you decide to ask for additional funding. So it's still a maybe at the moment when you introduce the application form on whether you're going to get this extra funding or not. So you put it in the system as you have asked for it, and you may get it. At the time of selecting the projects, as presented before during the selection committee and also later on by the monitoring committee, we will be informed if funding as requested by you has been officially granted to you as partners. And in case the region, the country decides not to give you that funding, you will also be informed in due time. In case you do not get the funding you were asked for, you will then need to provide within a 1 month period from official announcing that you will not get the funding, this special partner declaration of own means. So the message here is to be aware that when you ask for extra funding, it is not given that you will get it, and you should also plan for the risk that you will only have, let's say, your own means and the ERDF to implement the project. And everyone on your consortium should be aware of this risk. We have seen projects that, let's say, have not continued or have decided not to continue with implementation because certain partners were not given the funding they were asking for. Then they said, okay, we don't have 50% to match the ERDF. And because of all these changes, the project didn't move on. So it basically collapsed. So it's 18 months. Once again, it's a very short time. You should not waste time on deciding on whether you want to continue or not. So be aware of all these aspects from the very beginning and start discussing with partners that are financially sound and that have the means to cover this extra 50% in case funding is not granted to them, so as not to have, let's say, unhappy surprises later on. Okay, we can go to the next slide. On our website, you will also find additional documents. It's crucial that you go through the cost catalog because that explains to you what is eligible and what is not eligible and gives you a feel of how the budget for the project should be fixed. There is also the communication handbook that explains what are mandatory communication aspects that need to be implemented at project level, and so that you get an idea of what is extra, what you would like to have as an extra, and how to budget that extra communication activity. We also have a state aid guidance on our website, forms that it's good to read and understand a bit. And also one document that is now currently available within the application package is an FAQ for call 8. Our intention is to update this document regularly. So basically, if you would ask us for extra questions, we would all include them in this document and post it, update it on our website so that you are aware of further questions that have been asked and maybe you also were confronted with the same issue. On our website, you will also find the indicator definitions and the state of progress of program level indicators. Aside from the 2 indicators that were mentioned before, there is a full list of additional output indicators that you can link to your application form. You should look at them, select those that are maybe underperforming at program level. You should read the definitions. Please don't limit yourself as what it means to you. There is always an official definition, and just to be aware of your expectations and the program's expectations, read these definitions and understand them properly. If an indicator says that it refers to number of people, then you should basically link it, formulate your project output in a way that refers to number of people and not to organizations. As mentioned before, SMEs will be central to this specific call. So be aware that you have to deliver things for the SMEs. And when counting, you will be counting SMEs, not people working in the SMEs, not students that sometimes will work in 10 years from now for the SMEs, but the SMEs themselves. So be aware of these definitions. Go through the documents, and in case of questions, come back to us. There is also another document. We will also mention it later on in our discussion with the state aid. Maybe you have questions. What is an SME? We will have different, like, how do you define it? What is the official, what are the official rules to take into account for it? And then this document would offer you all the definitions and all the possible different examples that are available at European level when it comes to SMEs. And of course, there is also an EMS technical guidance. It's basically a document that allows you to, let's say, better submit your application form. We will also show you where to find it. And also we have an EMS FAQ that you will be able to access. So be aware of these sources of information. The FAQ call 8 is the only one that is integrated into your application pack, but all the other ones are available on our website. Next slide, please. Right, so we will soon talk about the eligibility criteria and the selection criteria. I also started mentioning these elements before, but now we will go into more detail about them. And first of all, just so that you are aware, this is a one-step application process when it comes to call 8. before, if you have done projects before in Interreg EMR, you usually are familiar with the fact that we had 2 steps. Like you would submit a draft, we would make some comments, and then we would allow you to resubmit and integrate our comments, and then the selection would be made. In this case, there is no more intermediate steps, so there you will not get additional recommendations on our halfway through the project preparation. So it's like 1 step and that's it. You only have 1 chance to introduce this application form. So please be aware of all these guidance that we're giving you, and ask the questions at the right time to the right people, so that you have all the information to prepare the application form properly. So there are different steps when it comes to the analysis of your project. And the first one, and it's also very important, and sometimes people disregard it, and many application forms have been rejected in the past just because of very minor things that were overlooked, and it's called the eligibility assessment. So if you do not pass eligibility assessment, you will not move on to the quality assessment. And of course, all those that pass the eligibility and the quality assessment will also be assessed from the state aid point of view. But I will explain a bit in detail what is eligibility. So if we move to the next slide, there is a set of questions that we usually ask ourselves when checking first an application form. The first one is if you submit your application on time. It was mentioned that the deadline, the very last moment you can submit would be 21st of September, and the deadline is 12 noon. What happens if you, let's say, start clicking at 11:59 and in the system, the application shows that it was basically submitted at 12:05? Well, in this case, you missed the deadline. Your application form was not submitted on time, so you may fail the eligibility check criteria. So important part, don't wait for the last minute to submit the application form in the system. Also, all mandatory fields in the application form are properly filled in. What we saw, for example, because you need to submit the application form in 3 languages, and let's say you have a work package, an activity, and a deliverable, and there you have, let's say for a deliverable, you did provide a translation in French and Dutch, but you did not fill in the German translation. So in this case, the application form, all fields of the application form have not been properly filled in, and there is a possibility of you missing the eligibility criteria. So this is how you have to look at these questions when it comes to your application form. Also, you need to complete all the compulsory annexes. I mentioned before those 3 annexes. If one of them is missing, or if a document is missing for one of the partners, then also the eligibility conditions are not fulfilled. And there is here also the eligibility question that was also asked in the chat. What is a minimum condition for passing the eligibility check? Basically 2 partners from 2 different member states, or at least 1 cross-border organization. EGTC stands for European Grouping of Territorial Cooperation. This is a special status. Not a lot of organizations have this status at European level. So I don't know if this will be your case when preparing the application form, but you should maybe start from the principle that you have at least 2 partners from 2 different member states. We also see this confusion that comes often, where people say like, yeah, but what if I have 1 Walloon partner and 1 Flemish partner? Is it a cross-border cooperation project? No, because we only have 1 member state present in this application form. So you could make it work if you introduce, let's say, a German partner and a Walloon partner, German partner or a Dutch partner and a Walloon partner, then that would work. But you need to have 2 member states, and from 1 member state, you need to have at least 1 partner. So in the end, your smallest partnership should be 2 partners from 2 different member states. This is what you need to be aware of in terms of eligibility. also mentioned before, you need to have the application form in the 3 languages. English is optional. You can also decide later on if your project gets accepted to introduce an English version in the EMS so that you can only do the reporting in English. Very important, all partners, so everyone who is listed as a full partner in your application form needs to have legal personality. We did have a case where one of the partners turned out later on not to have a legal personality, and then once again, the project collapsed. So be aware of this. And also be aware that when it comes to the legal personality, there is a special field in the EMS where you need to write what your organization is. Is it a large enterprise? Is it a small and medium one? Is it a public institution? And so on. So please check carefully those fields and select the correct one. And also write in the correct VAT for your organization where this is the case. In the EMS, you have a field where the ERDF co-financing rate has to be 50%, so check this for every partner. And of course, the project start date is 1st of January at the earliest, and the latest is 30th of June. We also saw, I think in the past, we had a project that, for example, submitted, let's say the later would have been 30th of June 2023, and they put in 1st of July 2023. In this case, the application form would also once again not be passing the eligibility check because you are not within this criteria. So be aware of this. Of course, like if you want to start your project on the 2nd of January, you could do that because it's after the 1st of January. So you would be able to pass the eligibility check in this case. But whatever you put before the 1st of January or 30th, after the 30th of June would be considered as not passing the eligibility check. So this is the set of questions we will be going through. You also have them available in the call guidelines. So go through them once again with your partners and ask questions if you have any about this topic. And yeah, we move on to the selection criteria. If you have passed the eligibility criteria, then we will start looking at your project based on the selection criteria. And there are 4 of them. But if you read also again the call guidelines, each of these criterion has behind it a set of guiding questions, like how do we come to the conclusion that your partnership and cross-border character are great, let's say, right? Then we look at those extra questions that you also have listed there, and we judge based on those. What you need to know about these 4 criteria is that they are rated on a scale from 1, which is insufficient, to 5, which is strong, and each of them gets a certain scoring. If, for example, let's say I will take an exceptional case where you say, okay, you scored 5 for partnership agreement, 5 for contribution to objectives, 5 for feasibility, but then when it comes to budget, you scored 2, your application form will not be able to be selected because the condition is that you have a score of minimum 3 under each criterion. So it's not always that the average counts, it also counts how much you score on each of these criterion. And I invite you to read the call guidelines and go through these elements, and basically you have control of how much you score on each of these criterion by how well you introduce your application form in the EMS. And that's basically the goal of today's training, is to show you what we want to see and to give you as much data as possible to have a good application form in the end. If we go to the next slide, yeah. Right, here you have more information about the program, where to find the documents, who to contact. And I think this brings us to the end of this part of the seminar. And I don't know if you have questions. I think this is the right time to start asking them regarding the information that has been provided up until now, because then we can give you more examples or more what to do and not to do, what not to do in order to have a successful application form. Are there questions at this moment? Have you maybe went through the call guidelines, and are there elements from there that are not that clear to you? Is it that we can take extra time to provide you guidance on that? Okay, I think at this moment our plan would be to take a 5-minute break and then come back to the second part of the presentation. We will then go more into details for the application form and the budget issues and so on. If in the meantime you do have questions, like you can think of a question, you can write it in the chat. And then when we start, like in 5 minutes, we can start also with answering that question. Does that work for you? Okay, then I would suggest that we resume at 11:06 if that works for you. And then we move on with the other parts. Okay, enjoy the break.
So, welcome back to our webinar. Hope that you could enjoy this 5-minute break. We have not made it too long, so in order to be certain that we will finish our on time, there is a lot of information that we want to pass, and okay, we were aware that already for the first part was a lot. Maybe it was going a bit fast, but in any case, the key intention was to point at important elements and also to guide you also towards the different tools that we have made available via our website most of the time. You also have this links here in the presentations that will also be made available. So do not hesitate to have a second look on all of this. And in case of question, like mentioned by Haruka, do not hesitate to contact our colleagues in the regional antennas, and we will also be there to support in case of more specific questions. So let's move on with the second part, and as promised, we will have a closer look at the application form, very practical for you, practical tips and tricks and attention points in order to understand well what we expect from you, where you should fill in what kind of information, because that's also very important to be successful, is to provide the right information on the right place. Yeah, so we'll go through the application form, the different sections like mentioned here. So let's start directly with this general information. Yes, no, that was it there before to start. That's the point. Okay, we are at the end of the process of the programming period. We have seen a lot of application forms coming to us. And okay, we have seen that sometimes, or in the most cases where it's not working well, it's because of some specific elements. And the first one is that the application form is too vague. It's not helping us to understand very well what are your intentions, what is the challenge that you have identified, and what you want to solve with your project. So that's where we also say be specific. So who, what, when, where, and how. This is important to understand the situation, what you want to do, but it's also important for you when implementing the project. It's good to have a clear plan agreed between all the members of your partnership from the very beginning. We have seen on a very regular basis that the plan is not clear before starting the project, and then it takes a lot of time to redefine before to start, and it also creates tensions and disagreements within the partners. So this is something that you also want to avoid. And again, given the time frame, if you are not clear before submitting, if you do not know clearly where you want to go and have clearly defined who has to take over what task at what moment, then there is a great chance that you will not be able to come and bring your project to a good end. So think about this, make good agreements, be specific, tell us precisely what it is about. Yeah, I mentioned it already before, but we say it again because for us it's fundamental. Cross-border is key, so we are not a Horizon 2020 program or Eurostars or whatever. We are a cross-border cooperation program, so it needs really to be central within your proposal. Yeah, it's also important to look around and know what has been done before and in how far you can build further on what is existing. This makes your proposal even more convincing. The risk if it is overlapping with existing initiatives, yeah, it's then that basically the conclusion would be that it's already been done. So please keep an eye on that, and also come with a proposal that differentiates from what has already been done, what you are already doing, what is the extra value. So like I said, describe very well what's the cross-border challenge. And also when describing your project, you're certainly specialized in the topic. But you have to be aware that your project will not be assessed by specialists in your field of activity. So in order to be convincing, it needs to be described in a way that makes it accessible, that makes it clearly and simple to understand, and without using too much jargon or things like this. Of course, we ask you to be precise, but not as precise as to write your application in a sense that only people from your sector can understand, because yeah, the risk is then that it comes over as not convincing, of people not really understanding what you want to do. So these are very general tips. So and yeah, please really take this into consideration when writing your application. So yes, here being specific, yeah, like I already said, it's important for also who's going to do what at what moment. You will see that in the application. You have the possibility for each work package to say, okay, there's a work package leader, so somebody who needs to take initiative. Just also say who is involved. This also should be reflected in the financial perspective, so the budget that you will set up. There must be this clear correlation between activities, who's doing what, and also the financing that you're requesting needs to be in good balance. Okay, now very concretely, this is the start screen for our web portal, which is called EMS, which stands for Electronic Monitoring System. And but it's a bit more than a monitoring system. It's not just monitoring; it's also the portal for submitting applications. It gives a secure environment in which you can communicate with us. And the first step to do is also to register. And so that's what we'll see. But here you also see here the link how to get to this page, this landing page. So as mentioned, have a look on it as soon as you can. Even if you say, okay, we still are at the beginning, we still have to think about the main information that we want to put, or the challenge we want to address. But have a look. It's really helping you because this will be the interface you have to use, and it's important to familiarize yourself with it. And if you have questions, because it's not fully clear, we have there the guidances and the Q&A. It will be displayed a bit later on, but we also have the colleagues again from the regional antennas that can help you, and we also have a help desk team that's there also to help you should you encounter any technical issue. They will be there just to help you to solve that and proceed with your application. So like I said, first step to do is to go and register yourself. It's an automatic registration. So you write in your username and a password, and you will get you will get a confirmation email, and then you can come in to the system, and then you can create, and that's I think on the next slide, is you can create your application form. if you go here on the left side, you will then see you have a menu. And when you go to My Applications, you go to Add Project, and that's how you create a project within this environment. And then you will have access to the application form. Also a reminder, we have a Word format of the application form. It's the idea to help you when exchanging information, to work on it, to really have drafting the text you want to put in, exchange it maybe within the partnership. But then this Word document is really just a working tool. You will have to copy paste information within the system and submit it via this portal to make it official. Yeah, and when you click on creating an application, it's very important that you go in this list and you go and see call 8 and click on the button apply. And for me, then I think it, if you understand well, it brings you then into the application. So a few, but very important tips. In EMS, you have to save very regularly. Because if you move from one screen to another without saving, you will lose your information. There's no automatic saving. There's a save button on the top left corner, if I'm not wrong. Maybe we can go back to the previous slide so we can show that. I don't know, it's no, we cannot see it because we're not in an application form for this screenshot, but look absolutely for this save button. And as soon as you have fill in a field, click on the save button. That's the most secure way to not lose any information, and that you would not be in a situation where you have to redo the work. I see that the presentation is, the computer is freezing. Yes, okay, so this is a bit unexpected. Maybe I can already proceed here with the slides I have on my side. Yes, then also there are specific questions asked in the application form, and it's very important that you address the question on itself. So we also have seen in the past that applicants are not providing the right information in the right field, are basically not answering the question, and maybe have also the tendency to repeat information. So we're not looking for a repetition, we're looking at an efficient application form, and where basically you have a straightforward answer to the question that is asked in the application form. So that's also a very important one, and that helps you to be convincing. And very specific for this call, we have limited the application form compared to the application form we have from the beginning of the period, or for the regular calls. We wanted to be more efficient also here, because we know that the time is short to set up an application. So, but yeah, there are, I think, two fields, or 2 or 3 fields where basically you should, that are visible in the system, in the EMS, but where you don't have to answer. And it's written in bold just before the, on top of the field, that the question is not applicable for this call. So do not put in information there. Focus really on the fields where information is requested. In the Word template there, we only have kept the fields that are relevant. And so it's due to a technical point that we cannot hide all the questions, but then we have clearly indicated if they have not to be filled in. Also, one important thing is that before submitting your application, there is a check. There's an automatic check function just to see if you have not omitted information, if you have not forgotten one field to be filled in. Take this into consideration. Check it sufficiently in advance. Do not wait the last 10 minutes before submission to push the check button, because maybe you will receive a message telling you that you have not filled in one field correctly, and then you have to start looking for it to make the corrections. And yeah, it can bring you in a difficult situation. We don't want that. You don't want this. So at the latest, a few days before the submission deadline, check your application and see what the system is telling you, if you have filled in all the fields or if something is still missing. And once this check is successful, basically the system accepting your application as being filled in completely, then you still have to push a second time to submit. So take this into account, and like I already told you, do not wait until 11:58, 59 before pushing the submit button, because you have also to take into account that there is some delay between the moment that you push a button in your computer and the moment that our server is receiving the information. It's not long, but sometimes a few seconds can make the difference. We base ourselves on the log information on our server. That will be crucial to decide. So do not rely on your computer clock just saying, hey, I just pushed 1 or 2 seconds before the deadline, because that will be too late. And again, it would be a pity. As mentioned, technical questions. We have a team working at the help desk. They answer your request quickly, but yeah, we cannot guarantee that it is within the minute. So there is a reasonable delay for looking at your request and answering it. The most efficient way to get information and the fastest way to get information to your questions is also first to check our FAQ that we have available. So most frequent questions, basic questions, have been addressed already. You can find information there. We also have a guidance document, so have a look on it. This will certainly help you. But if you are stuck at a certain stage, you can then address your question at the help desk via this email address, and that's displayed. And yeah, should you also encounter at the submission moment a difficulty, contact the help desk, but via email. That's where we have a trace of the issue you encountered. We can take this into account. Phone calls cannot be registered. Okay, good. I think time to move on to the application form itself and the first section, which is project overview. And in this project overview, yeah, we also have where you have to fill in a project name and an acronym. A first advice from us is select carefully the name of your project and the acronym. It's also the brand name of your project. So take something that's meaningful. Do not take too weird combinations, which is not really telling something to people or not being appealing. Yeah, it's still an important thing because it will last for the rest of the duration of the project. You cannot change it afterwards. As said, explain the project in a non-specialist language, and also very important, when you have to, you will have to give a description for every partner, provide information, contact details, but you also have to select a legal personality for the partner, and it's important that it or a program is not made for supporting individual persons. It needs to be organizations. So you cannot be as a self-employed person being a project partner. Then a very important section, and it will even be more important than in the past for the ones who have applied already in the past. The summary section. So because we have decided to reduce the application form and take out maybe some questions, we're expecting that some key information in this summary section. And very important then in the summary section is to describe the challenge that your project will address, and also provide evidence to make clear that this challenge, that this need is existing. So that's important for us. We are looking for projects that are need-based and not offer-driven. So tell us about the situation that you know in the program area, and make it clear to us in which regard it is an issue, in which regard it is a challenge for the future, and why it needs to be addressed, why we need to have a solution, and also why it needs to be addressed in a cross-border way. What's the added value of doing it together? And then obviously, as we already said, this call is a targeted call, and then we also need to understand very well to what extent the project result will help to improve the energy efficiency of SMEs. So these information are really essential and should be in the summary section. That's what we are expecting from you. Then if we move on to the next part, we have the project description. There you have different, we will not go further into detail and that. We think that the questions that are there are self-explaining. So read the question carefully and just answer and address this question. Yeah, and like I said, a regular mistake is to be too general, so be precise enough, make references to what you will do and what you describe later on in the application form, like in the work plan, where you are very concrete about what you're going to do. So yeah, so that was it for the general part, and for the work plan, Raluca will give you further explanation on what we expect and how you can best fill in these fields.
Yes, thank you. Let's move on and see what the next slides offers us. So here you have an image of the EMS and how things are displayed in the EMS. You would have what are called, let's say, cross-cutting work packages. Basically, they are requested. They come with the system, and you have the management part and the communication part. For the management work package, be aware only the lead partner can have costs under it, but you explain how the entire partnership cooperates there. And then for communication, what you will be delivering in terms of communication. Then we also have a specific requirement, which is the FLC work package. It has to be, let's put in the implementation block. It will always be the last work package listed there. So here it's an example of a proposal that has, let's say, 2 implementation work packages, and then the third one would be FLC. If you have, I don't know, 5 implementation work packages, the very last one should be FLC. You don't need to write anything in this FLC work package. We know what it is. You just need to budget it properly. And that's it. The system will also display some, in case you do investments, you'll also have some work packages that usually are marked in pink, and those would be the investment work packages. But that is if you build something within your project. So we see more often this, let's say, green fields and not so often the pink ones. If we move to the next slide. Right, I started mentioning about the work package management. So you have the management arrangements that need to be described. Very important, only the lead partner has costs for this. So be aware of this. And there is also a limitation of how much you can put under work package management. It is closely related to the total budget of the implementation work packages. So we would normally recommend that you first write, let's say, the content, the core of your project, and you budget that properly. And depending on that, you would be calculating the FLC, and you would also be calculating the management efforts. So you have here the thresholds that you need to be aware of. If we move on to the next slide. Right, the work package FLC, because the FLC work packages appears as one of the implementation work packages in the green fields. Normally, for you to be able to submit the application form, you would need to select an output indicator. It's your choice. We know that there is no, let's say, work that you do in terms of FLC, but for the system, it needs to have this specific output linked to it. But you would, whatever indicator you choose, you always have to put it at 0. So that's a specific issue for this work package. Normally, you don't need to hire an external audit to validate the costs that you make on the project. We have our team of colleagues that are called the first level controllers. Whatever costs you incur on the project, they will check the invoices and so on. So you would be doing the reporting to the program. The program has a centralized way of checking these costs. And because we provide this service to you, you will also have an invoice coming from the program. And this invoice is the 2% that we ask you to write here under the FLC work package. So each partner has to budget 2% of their partner budget. So you only look at the content work packages that you have, that you are participating in. You calculate 2% of it, and then you put it as a cost for the first level control work package under external expertise. So this is the way you come to your full budget as a partner within the project. Then we can move on to the next slide. Yeah, when it comes to communication, we also see that people tend to overlook this, saying, okay, it's a simple task, we don't have to worry that much about it. And then they just like put in standard things like, okay, we will do a website and leaflet and a poster, and that's enough. But we would like you to put a bit of thought into it, not just go for these automatic means of promotion that you have. You need to tailor your communication strategy to what your project does, and you need to show it in the application form, because this is how you judge how cohesive and feasible the project is as a whole. If the story you tell in terms of content is properly communicated to the outside world. So you do need to have within the project a poster and a logo, and normally these are some services that the program can offer to you. We already have templates for it, so you don't need to budget these extra costs. You would need to budget, let's say, a website and make sustainable arrangements for it. So like this website is not something that you only have valid for 18 months throughout the project implementation, but it also needs to last after the project duration, because people might still have questions, and there is this reference point online that people should be able to go to. Then you also have to be aware of the fact that you're not only communicating to a community of experts that have the same specialized knowledge as you have. I don't know if you're doing some special renewable energy source study and demo, you are not only going to communicate to that community, but also to the general public. So your message has to be tailored to the different audience of your project, and you need to show this in the types of deliverables and the type of events and materials that you are going to produce. So be aware of this. As I mentioned before, we noticed that people just treat this communication work package very superficially, but in reality is something that should help you in the implementation, and you should build it correctly and do something that makes sense to you. You don't need to do a newsletter if you find that you have no experience with newsletters, you have never done it before. Now with the data protection regulation, it might be even more difficult to send out such a document to people. So like, do something that makes sense to you and to your audience, your different stakeholders, and something that you are experienced and know how to handle. You only have 18 months, so I don't think it's the time where you start exploring with something that you have never done before. So if you move on to the next slide. As I mentioned to you, these are some examples of the posters. The templates are already online. You would only need to write here a description of what your project is. So you do not need to hire an external expert, a publicity company to do a poster for you. We already have the template. You just need to write the text and just display it. And the same thing is true for the project logo. So there is this standardized visual image we want to promote. It's very important that you use the logo that the program provides because it fits a family of projects and it is easily recognizable at European level. This is something that, let's say, the European Union deeply cares about. And as much as we appreciate the creative efforts people put in designing their logos, we sometimes see that they miss the point. So the idea of having a project logo is also promoting the funding source it was supported by, and people just forget all about the Interreg logo and the fact that this is a legal requirement that they need to comply with, and they just put their own project logo there, disregarding the compliance with the law and the requirements. So just to do away with any difficulties in implementation because you did not use the right logo, the program will offer one to you. Don't need to budget extra funds for it. You just use it, and that's easy for everyone. You just need to focus on the content part of your project. If we move on to the next slide, right, we get to the intervention logic, and I give the floor to my colleague again. This is a very important topic, and please listen carefully and take it in. So JP, you have the floor.
Thank you, Raluca. So I will do my best to make it understandable for everyone for this point of intervention logic. But before going into that, I also saw in the chat that our help desk colleague Marc Belin was very reactive during the presentation, and also shared a screenshot of the system, of the EMS system, where you can also see the save button. We will also include this screenshot into the presentation, but yeah, that's absolutely the button that you have to look for and where you have to push regularly on, again, to avoid losing information. About the intervention logic, yes, you will, in the application form, when you are in the work package section, for each work package, you will have to define main outputs, and there you will be facing this question about choosing a program output indicator. And our experience is also that it's not always easy to understand what is expected and how to put that in perspective, what this means. And we can certainly understand this, that's not always an obvious link. So this is the reason why we would like to explain the relation between the projects and the program, and this is really the section where you can clearly indicate and show to which extent or quantify also your contribution of your project to the program ambitions. And so as said earlier, for this call, we expect you to contribute at least to one of the two specific indicators that we have mentioned, this PSI 6 and PSI 17. So if you see here on the screen on the left side, there you have a drop-down menu. There you have to look for this PSI 6, PSI 17. Yeah, at least you have to mention it in one Word package. So it's not so that every Word package can bring a contribution to that. It's really depending on how you construct your application. The Word packages are there to define really big blocks within your project with then objectives for each block, just to say, okay, how are we going to achieve our objectives with the project? But then in each block we can define objectives and also steps to reach this objective. And then you have to also show in how far this is related to the ambitions of the program. That's why we also have in the next slide taking a bit distance from the application form and also the project, putting it into perspective. And what does intervention logic mean? Yeah? So it's just saying that when designing your intervention, what your action, what you want to do, we start from the principle there's a certain logic behind. And that's what we have done with the program, and that's what you see on the left side in blue. As you can see that we have defined priorities and objectives, but we also have defined results and we have also indicators to measure this result. And we can achieve the results that we want to bring, the change basically we want to bring with the program in the area, by measuring also the output that comes from the program. But as a program, we are not doing things on the field. We need you as project partnerships to implement the effective change on the field. And that's where we have this green part. It's telling about projects. But also as for the program, the project has an objective and wants to bring effective results into the field, a specific change. And this is also something that you have then to define the intermediate steps that can help you to monitor, just to see if with your project you're on the right track to achieve and to come to this change you want to bring in the field. And with this orange arrows, you can see that there is this interaction or this contribution from the green side, from the project side, to the program. And that's why we are, it's important for us to well understand in how far your project has clear objectives, wants to implement a clear change. And if you have a clear plan also on just saying what are the steps that brings us to this change, and how can we monitor that as a project, but then also telling us, okay, with our initiatives, we will contribute to your objectives as a program. We will help you as a program to achieve your objectives. That's what's behind this idea of intervention logic, and that's also why you find back these fields in the application form, and they are very important. Think about it. when selecting indicators, it's important that you put for yourselves targets, values, just to say, okay, I don't know how many SMEs you want to support, for example. Come up with a realistic value. There is no advantage in coming with an incredible high number of SMEs, or claiming that you will help a lot of SMEs or support them, because if we think that that's not realistic, it's also not helping into the assessment. Maybe we'll also say, hey, this is a nice promise, but we do not believe that this can happen. So think about it. Just give us a realistic answer and estimate to that, and this will be the best way to be convincing. Also in the next slide, it's trying to give also this perspective, with just saying, okay, you have the bigger context, which is program level, and then you have the project context, which is a smaller entity, a smaller bubble within this big context, this big story. And at this project level, you need to have this outputs, but also this deliverables. It's very important. You will see for each work package, you can define activities and deliverables linked to the activities. If you define very well what are the deliverables, that's meaning what you need as tools to achieve your objectives, your results, and bring the change, this helps you. This is giving us also an indication that you have a clear plan and how to implement your project and how to be successful at the end of the project. So that's very important to take into account. And now also very important topic, which is the budget, and Raluca will tell you further on that.
Yes, let's start with the very first slide of the budget part. So there are specific budget lines that are defined in the application form. These are staff, administration costs, travel and accommodation, equipment, external expertise, and investment. So these are the options when it comes to the budget lines. What you need to know is that the administration costs and the travel and accommodation costs are calculated as a flat rate now, so you don't need to worry about putting them manually in the system. They are a percentage of the staff costs, so they are automatically calculated. So then you will only focus on staff and then equipment, external expertise, and investments. When it comes to external expertise, also we are aware that maybe your experts might also be traveling. Just be aware that these travel costs that the experts that you hire on your project will be doing are part of the external expertise. So travel costs, as they are budgeted under the project, they refer to the staff that are working there. So this is in a nutshell what you have to expect in the EMS. And then if we go to the next slide, you have a definition of who are your staff, who is your staff, people who are working for the partner organization. So then you need to indicate their positions and their profile in the budget, and also assign an hourly rate and a number of hours for all of the staff people that are involved. Be aware that if you are doing the project and you are not planning on hiring people, or like if you do not have people but you then only have external experts, then you would have to put those experts' salaries under external expertise. So this is something that you need to be aware of. Also, if you do not have staff costs in the EMS, you will not have the possibility of claiming office and administration and travel and accommodation costs, because, as I mentioned before, these are flat rates calculated based on what you have under staff costs. If we move on to the next slide, as I mentioned before, the administration costs, they are calculated as 15% of your staff costs, and they usually are meant to cover things like rent, utilities, office supplies, general accounting. And what is important for these flat rates is that you do not need to provide any proof of the cost that you incurred. Like, we will not be asking you to give us an invoice of how much rent or how much electricity you paid for your office. So basically, they are given to you, no questions asked, based on what you have claimed under staff costs. The same, if we move on, the same is now done for the travel and accommodation. It is calculated as a flat rate. This one is 1.5 of staff costs, and how you will see it in the system, and that is that both the administration costs and the travel and accommodation costs are put together. And then there is a one general flat rate of 16.5 in the system. So you only need to click on that one, and then you don't need to put in anything under what appears in the system as being travel and accommodation. If we move to the next slide, we have here an example of how things would look in the EMS. So if you go into the budget of every partner in the system, you have those boxes that you need to tick. If you do not tick the flat rate boxes, then the partner will not be able to get the flat rate. So the budget will be calculated without the flat rate. So be very careful when putting the data in the EMS and in ticking the right boxes. So there you have 16.5. That includes, as I mentioned, administration and travel and accommodation. And that's it, how you do it. Just pick the right box and the system takes care of calculating it automatically for you. If we move on to the next slide, we get to the external expertise and services, and you have here some examples of what you could budget for it. Management analysis, organization of events, depends on the content of your project. And of course, I also mentioned it before, the first level control needs to be put in the application form as external expertise. We can move on to the next slide. We have the equipment that you will be using. It was already mentioned that only the depreciation costs are eligible, so be aware of the possibilities that are out there. You can purchase, you can rent or lease equipment, all types of equipment that you need, once again, depending on the nature of your work. We would encourage you to also go to the cost catalog and read the sections about what is needed when it comes to equipment. Seeing that your project is only 18 months, I don't know if you have, let's say, equipment worth of 1 million euro, you will not be getting 50% of it from the project, from the program, during implementation. You will only get the depreciation for the amount of time that you have available in the project. Also, something that we see when writing the application forms is that when it comes to equipment, people are very vague in explaining what sort of equipment they need. You know, it's like they just write equipment for doing test 1, but we do not know what that equipment is. So it is useful from the building of your application form that you write in what you need. I don't know, I need 5 3D printers for this issue on the project. So be specific, write the type of equipment that you need, how many pieces of equipment you need, how much one such piece of equipment costs. So this is the specificity, the quantitative aspect of how we want you to fill in the application form, because this allows the assessor to really understand what you're doing. Like when you say like partners will cooperate, they will use equipment to do the demo project, it's very general, like everyone can say that. So we do not understand how that really applies to what you're doing in your project. If we move on to the next slide, we have the infrastructure and works part. So as we said, you would normally need to do works. What is infrastructure? Something you build, you do it yourself. And And we do not have that many projects in our program that use the investment, the infrastructure and works section in the EMS, but maybe you are one of those projects, then be aware of these things. It's once again the issue of depreciation. And one frequent mistake that we see is that people write under infrastructure and works something that would normally fit under equipment. So it might be that you do not need infrastructure and works work package, that the normal green work packages, the implementation work packages that have been shown to you are to be used. But as I said, it depends on what you are going to do within this 18 months period. If we move on to the next slide. Right. You have here a list of some common mistakes that we have seen, is that sometimes people write the application form and the descriptions in the work packages, in the deliverables, and then we normally check that the story you tell in words also matches the story you tell with the numbers and the way you wrote your budget. And then we see different things, like when describing the equipment, you see activities that do not appear in the description in the text part. So these sort of inconsistencies would generate a lower ranking when it comes to the budget selection criteria I mentioned before, and this basically lowers the chance of your project being approved. So it makes sense that when you, let's say, it depends how you work. First, you write the story and then you start with the budget. But at a certain point, someone needs to cross-check the two to make sure that they together tell a consistent story and it's the same thing. Then we also see that sometimes people just like, okay, we need 1 million, we have 2 partners, so that's like 500,000 each partner, equally distributed. Basically, they do exactly the same things. But we know this is not realistic. So like just doing this, we know it's like the easy way out when you don't have enough time and it's just like, okay, we split it evenly and that's how we put it in the system. But basically this shows, let's say, a poor preparation of the budget, and it shows an unrealistic budget. And once again, it will have an influence on how much you score on the budget side in the selection criteria. So you have to really carefully think about not only the words, but also the numbers and how you explain the numbers to us in your application form. We also see that there are different sections in the EMS. When you write the work packages, you have one amount, total work package value, that is automatically generated by the system, and then you have an amount per activity. That one is not generated by the system, and it needs to be written by hand by the lead partner, the one who puts in the amounts. And what we see is that people don't check the amounts. Like, we have math issues. When you add the amounts that are written under 2 activities that make up one work package, these 2 amounts together don't add up to the total amount of the work package. So this shows, once again, that whoever worked in the system did not cross-check and did not make the numbers consistent. And it also reflects badly on how you are going to assess the feasibility and the budget of your application form. So be aware of these aspects. There is a section in the EMS where you have to forecast your expenditure throughout the implementation. You have periods of 6 months, the project implementation, and each period should have a certain amount that goes with it. Once again, people just divide it evenly and say like, okay, where throughout the project implementation, you would be spending the same amount of money. Realistically, that does not happen. We see that at the beginning, there is like a lower spending because people get it. Let's say they get used to reporting, they might have costs that are not fully approved and they resubmit and so on. And then towards the end, it picks up. But it's like if you have not spent 1 million euro in 1 year, it's not that you have then 3 months where you're going to use it all. So please be aware of this and try to make it as realistic as possible and avoid just like splitting things evenly. it might look like the easy way out, but it's not doing you any favors in the long run in the assessment of the application form and also during implementation. If we move on to the next part, here you have some examples of how things would look in the EMS when you would encode them correctly. So for example, for staff costs, you have a breakdown of the different types of people who are working on the project. So it's like it's not only a project manager, but you have different team members, like different profiles that are working. Also, one mistake that we see is that people, like, you have a partner working and then they only list their boss. Like, we have a hard time thinking that someone who is the general director of a company is going to come and like work in the EMS and do the content work and do the administrative work. So while we are not denying that your bosses and directors are involved in the project and they take executive decisions, strategic ones, that doesn't mean that you ignore the people that are actually working in the system, like the accounting or the financial manager or the project manager. And if you do not give a full profile of your team, it looks like you do not have enough manpower and enough resources and capacity to carry out the work. So like every line you put in the EMS tells something about you as a partner and the project as a whole. So choose carefully what you want to put in the system. You see there for external expertise, some examples, like you just write first line control, it's first level control normally, and that's the FLC. And then if you have events, you also have to budget them separately and then try to give us more information of these smaller parts, blocks, as mentioned before, that help you achieve the result, because this means that you have thought through the process, not just like, okay, I'm gonna need 500,000 euros to do my demo, and that's it. Okay, you are asking for public funds, so be aware that people have the right to ask you for additional explanations, and for you to break down the amount is a prerequisite for you to get the money. Right, so these are a few examples about the budget. And if we move on to the next slide, we get to the Q&A section. And I think there is already a question that was asked in the chat that we haven't yet addressed. So it says here, a project partner which only works with hired staff and has no direct staff under contract can participate, but only with external costs. Right, because then if you do not hire your people yourself, you are not normally supposed to get the office and administration and the travel and accommodation, because that is only for the staff of the partner organization itself. Is this, yeah.
Maybe to complement on that, so we also advise you to have a look on the cost catalog, where we're also explaining what fits under staff costs or what should fit under external expertise. There are still some possibilities that for staff that it's not directly hired by you, still to fit under staff costs. And this is for secondment, so meaning that you have staff employed by another employer, but then basically there's an agreement that they come and will work in your company in order to implement the project, and this agreement is only for this project time, or even it can be a bit broader than the project time. No problem at all, but this is still a way to we see this as still valid and still can fit under staff costs. And also if you have temporary staff, so in interim staff, this also can fit under the definition of staff cost. But from the moment on that there is external staff working as self-employed people, for example, and for which you then have a contract, but not a working contract, but more a contract for delivering a certain service, then it fits into external expertise. So I hope that this is clarified. Again, have a look on the cost catalog, and should you still have questions, do not hesitate to come back to the team, and then we will have a closer look to your specific situation. So I see that we have reached our time. I don't know if there's still other questions that you would like to be addressed now based on the information that we have provided during this webinar. If so, do not hesitate to raise your hand or still mention it into the chat. There was still some information on state aid that we wanted to pass to you, but okay, our time is up for today. So the only thing that we still want to insist on in relation with state aid, Raluca already mentioned it before, but there is a self-assessment document. It's an important document, so you have to hand it in. It needs to be made up for each individual organization within the partnership, so it's not one state aid statement for the whole project, but it's one per project partner or applicant partner. Have a look on these questions. The document is also explaining, giving definitions, how to understand things. So what's going to happen is that we ask you to do this first exercise. We do not expect that you enroll specialist lawyers into state aid for this. The key point, and very important, is that we want to draw attention to this state aid question at an early stage, because, as mentioned, this can mean that you can receive less funding depending on the conditions. So so it's important that you are aware of that from the beginning. And again, if you have further questions on that, do not hesitate to come back to us. So in the meanwhile, I have not seen any hand raised or any additional question in the chat. So I think that we can close it here for today, and we thank you for your participation and your contributions to the exchange. We wish you a lot of success in this in the next steps you will take, and again, go back to our tools here. Indeed, for more information, we have the website, and here the different links and the contact details. So we are there with the whole team to support you during all this process. So make use of this knowledge and expertise, and yeah, hopefully we'll see interesting applications from your side. And for the rest, I wish you a good day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.